Welcome back to the Mike Huckabee Show on this Monday. Lot to go through, and someone I always lean on and depend upon and totally trust to help us get to the truth. Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox News senior judicial analyst and good friend, and he joins me now. Judge, great to talk to you again.
Mike, it's a delight to be with you. Thank you for that very, very generous introduction. Very kind of you, my friend.
Well, thank you. And I want to remind our listeners that Judge Napolitano's book, it's called It's Dangerous to Be Right When the Government is Wrong. I can't think of a more timely title and book than the judge's book. And if you are like me and you're just so frustrated with this government, then you're going to find his book an incredibly compelling read. Judge, I want to get right to the topic of this weekend. We lost our 2,000th American soldier in Afghanistan. And I just want to get right to the point. Is it worth it?
No. In my opinion, it is not worth it. In my opinion, the American government ought to have learned the lesson of the British and the Russians. It's a country and a terrain and a culture and a people that cannot be occupied in a manner that benefits the occupying entity or even benefits the people that are there. I think, quite frankly, our military presence in the Middle East attempting to imbue democracy on people utterly unwilling to accept it has been the cause of much of our heartache. Now, when I say unwilling to accept it, I'm defining democracy, Mike, in a way that I expect you and most of your good listeners will agree. It is not simply the majority rules. It is also respect for the rule of law and the recognition of the inalienable rights of every individual. These latter two are utterly rejected by the people who dominate this part of the world. The Israelis are a notable exception. They are a democracy. They do uphold the rule of law. They do recognize the primacy of the individual over the state and the inalienability of individual rights. As far as I know, there is no other country in the Middle East, whether it's religious, cultural, or historical, that recognizes those aspects of humanity, and we can't successfully shove it down their throats. We ought to have learned that lesson a long time ago. Afghanistan is the longest war in America's history. Can anybody say we are freer or safer because of it? I don't think so.
Well, and even the president of Afghanistan says that terrorism abounds, that actually terrorism is increasing, not decreasing there, and it is more dangerous, not less dangerous. It clearly has not turned out as everyone hoped. And I don't want to blame exclusively the Obama administration for this, because I believe that, with all due respect to George W. Bush, who I love personally, I think it has always been naive to assume that you can export democracy to people who do not embrace, as you so, I think, eloquently said, the rule of law and the unalienable right of individual freedom, and with that responsibility. But we've just gone through this time, Judge, last year, earlier this year, or last year, I guess, the Arab Spring. I think you have called it in a recent opinion column, the Arab Spring has become a Western winter. What do you mean by that?
I mean that we are now paying the price for our meddling in other people's governments. We paid a small price in Cairo when our embassy was attacked and some physical damage was done to the real estate, but nobody was harmed. Why are they angry at us in Cairo? Because we intervened in their governmental process. President Obama, in my view, inappropriately helped remove Hosni Mubarak, the longtime strongman, from the presidency of Egypt. Now, he called himself president. He was never popularly elected. He was a dictator, but he was friendly to the West, and it was basically a peaceful country. Because the president is surrounded by some crackpots in the State Department who think that the mob in the streets knows what's best, he helped push Hosni Mubarak out, and the forces that took over the government are forces that are anti-American, anti-Israeli, and anti-West. Now, the case of Libya is even a stronger case. There, we actually bombed in Libya without a declaration of war, without even any permission from the Congress. The president just sent military planes to bomb. He denied the military was there. We now know that intelligence forces were there wearing boots and carrying military hardware, but since they weren't wearing uniforms, the president was technically correct, though highly misleading when he told us that we weren't there. As a result of our physical presence and our killing in Libya without a declaration of war, a country run by a dictator, but again, one who was very favorable and friendly to the West, was deposed, and there's effectively no government there now. The government in Libya is now whoever controls the streets. It should be no wonder that our ambassador was killed and our consulate burnt and destroyed. The president now is suffering from the result of terrible decisions that he made and that his predecessor made by interfering in the governmental affairs of Middle Eastern countries. They are striking back at us because they didn't want us to interfere and they don't want us there. Now, I know that that is not always a popular argument to make. I have not hesitated to criticize George W. Bush when I disagreed with him and to support him when I did agree with him. But this idea that we can be the world's policeman, that we can somehow export our cultural values and our governmental mores to a part of the world totally alien to it, is a loss and a waste of American life and American resources. We spent $1 trillion fighting that war in Afghanistan. We borrowed the $1 trillion, so it still has to be paid back. We are not one iota safer or freer. We are just a lot poorer because of two bad decisions by two American presidents who thought they could kill without moral justification and without unpleasant consequences.
Judge Andrew Napolitano is my guest here on the Mike Huckabee Show. And Judge, you know, as we're talking about these events in the Middle East, it's appearing to me that there's such a naivete in assuming that if you put a form of government in place, call it a democracy because you have an election, that establishes freedom. But the truth is, in these countries, there's not freedom of speech. There's not freedom of religion. There are not rights for women. There's no way that you can call it a democracy, call it a nation of freedom, when people can't speak against their government. They can't print what they want. Women have to shut up and be told to be subjugated to their men and fall under Sharia law. Why on earth did we ever think that there could be freedom for a country when there wasn't freedom for the individuals within that country?
I don't know what was going through George Bush's mind when he decided to attack Afghanistan. But you and I probably remember what was going on in the country. I mean, this was literally in the months following 9/11. And the President Bush had persuaded the Congress and the country that the people who generated the support for 9/11 were in Afghanistan and had taken over the government of Afghanistan, and we needed to strike back at them. That was an error, but we didn't learn it was an error until after we struck back. We know where the support for 9/11 came from. It came from our so-called friends in Saudi Arabia. Well, we're not going to strike at them because of the vast commercial relationships that private industry and the American government has with Saudi Arabia. So everybody went along with George W. Bush's invasion. And once you invade a country and throw out the government, what are you going to replace it with? So it seemed like the right thing to do at the time. In retrospect, it was an utter waste of lives and of resources, and we're paying the price. Look, you and I have friends in the intelligence community, and you know there are people in the intelligence community who like a muscular foreign policy. There are people in the intelligence community that like a diplomatic foreign policy. But the folks that I talk to tell me, soon in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda will take over the government, and President Karzai will be gone. And it'll be exactly back to square one where it was in September of 2001, before we had borrowed the $1 trillion and lost the thousands of troops.
You know, I fear it may be worse than it was. It's like the classic old story in the New Testament when Jesus said, you know, you sweep out a demon, but you didn't put anything in its place, and 7 more come to replace the one that you got rid of.
Right.
Because you didn't replace it with something. And
right.
That's what appears to be happening across the Middle East. We get rid of Mubarak, but what do we have? We got the Muslim Brotherhood, for heaven's sakes.
You know, I was visiting Luxor about 10 years ago with a friend, and the other day the friend and I were talking about the trip, and he said, do you remember that when we left the hotel and we went to the Valley of the Kings, we had armed guards with us carrying machine guns? I said, yes, who could forget that? We were tourists and we were protected by armed guards. He goes, do you remember what they were protecting us against? The Muslim Brotherhood. And now that group runs the government.
Yeah.
These are bad times in the Middle East, and much of it was fomented by the inappropriate intrusion of American troops.
Well, Judge, I appreciate your perspective. Always great to talk to you, and if people have not read your book, I hope they'll get it, because I think it's going to give them a real insight into the fact that we'd better hold our own government accountable. I don't think we have. I think we've been a bit naive about what our own government has done, and especially in light of the recent days with the attacks in Libya and the outright deception and lies that have been told to us. We should demand accountability, because our government operates only with the consent of the government, of the governed. And I do not give my consent to be lied to. I just don't. And, Judge, I know you don't either.
I'm entirely with you, Mike, and it's always a pleasure to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Judge Andrew Napolitano. His book is It's Dangerous to Be Right When the Government is Wrong, and delight to have him here. We've been talking about this lack of